Today we've got questions on Blessed Duns Scotus, African countries, Catholic monarchies. What would Charles do as U.S. president in the 60s? Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with leading monarchist Charles Coulombe.
Leading monarchist? What's that, like Chief Leper?
Well, that's what one of the journals described you. It was sort of quoting you in her article, and so...
Yes. She said I was revered.
And you are.
By whom?
Other lepers.
They all present me with little bits and pieces as they fall off. Well, I appreciate that, gang. And speaking of appreciation, I really want to thank everyone who's written into me for my 64th birthday. I want to thank the kids at the ITI for the munificent birthday celebration and gifts they showered me with yesterday. I was very, very touched. 64 years, gang. As a junior boomer, this is a milestone on my slow progression out the door. But no, it was interesting. We had a bit of an after party, and I was asked to reminisce about some of my past birthdays. And I think one of them that still, I've had a lot of great birthdays, great birthday parties without a doubt. But the first one I remember was 1964, so 60 years ago. But one of my favorite memories is my 16th birthday in when was that? 1976. Because my father had me promise when I was 12 that I wouldn't smoke cigarettes, and he made me promise that if I didn't smoke cigarettes, his reward, I wouldn't smoke cigarettes until I was 16. And if I kept that promise, then when I turned 16, he would take me to a tobacco shop and buy me a box of cigars, a pipe, and a bag of pipe tobacco. And so on my 16th birthday, I had not smoked a cigarette. And we went down to the late lamented Tinderbox on Wilshire Boulevard, just inside Santa Monica. Wonderful shop, closed down about, I don't know, now 8 or 9 years ago now. It was a kinder, gentler world in so many ways. And we went back home, and my dad, the cigar was always fixed to it. My dad smoked cigars constantly. So he taught me how to smoke the pipe. And then when I was done with that, we sat there, he showed me how to smoke a cigar, which requires a certain amount of finesse. And we sat there long into the evening, side by side, puffing away and talking. And that was just wonderful. I loved him before and I loved him after. But that day really, and especially that particular several hours, really, really sits in my memory. And it was, he trusted me when I told him I hadn't smoked cigarettes, and I hadn't. And he came through on his promise. And I felt that I'd gone a long jump toward manhood that day, and it wasn't just because of learning how to smoke. That was a wonderful, wonderful memory. And there was some others, but it was a very poignant, touching time. So again, if any of my comrades at the ITI are listening, and I know some of you watch. Thanks, guys. Thanks. I had two very old friends of mine over from LA the 2 days before, and I was showing them around Vienna, and it was very nostalgic. It was reliving the early '80s in Hollywood, far off misspent youth. I'm grateful to have a lot of contact with young people. I really am, because when you're my age, it's very tempting to sort of curl up in yourself and basically meditate on the dead days of the past. And my both my nieces and nephews and godchildren, my ITI family here, and all of you out there, you know who you are, you crowd of young folk who are our core demographic. Uh, you help force me to stay in the present, more importantly, in the future. If in return I can give you a bit of the best of the past that you can use to fight the good fight in a battlefield that I cannot imagine, even as I've had to fight it in not just me, obviously, in battlefields that our fathers never imagined, you know, and that's the way these things are. And bear this in mind, uh, as you get older and you have children, remember they're the most precious thing you've got. They are future, and they should feel like the most important thing in the world. I don't mean you've got to coddle them or anything like that. God knows my dad didn't coddle us. But we knew he loved us, and we knew that we were the most important things in his life. And your kids will need to know that from you. And if they know that, and if they respect you, they will hold on to what you believe. If you don't do that, and if they don't respect you, then they'll be seduced by whatever seduces them.
Whew. All right. Yeah, a couple more
I'm not
years
saying
and,
that's,
and you can retire, Charles.
yeah, well, yeah, my nephews asked me, have you thought about retirement? And I said, oh, yeah, I've got a retirement home picked out. I said, oh, really? What's that? The Essex Packing Plant in Hackensack, New Jersey. I'll come back as dog food. I can't afford to
No.
retire. I can't afford to retire. I've got a Tumbler House pension. You think I'm going to be able to survive on $12 a month? I don't.
That's your fault. You have to put in your own work for your own pension. You have to set up the stand and collect for yourself. You're not willing to put in the work. You don't get any money, Charles. What do you think this is? You're just gonna loaf around and expect people to put money in your plate? That's ridiculous.
Pretty much, yeah. After a lifetime of loyal labor to the family, to the company.
Oh, so you're one of these people that are big on entitlement. Entitlement. Yeah, you just want to kick back.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I lost me my entitlements. Now, see, in the pre-show, we were talking about loyalty.
Right.
But it doesn't go just one way. It's supposed to go two ways.
I think you're forgetting all of the different ways that Tumblr House takes care of you. You're looking for your focus is so narrow on money. Everything's money, money, money with you. I don't get it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess I'm just a money grubbing old man, a regular Scrooge. Of course, the difference is he had some. No, it's a terrible thing, when you go to see a performance of A Christmas Carol, with somebody, an older, well-to-do person, and said well-to-do person is weeping at the end of it. He said, yes, it's a happy ending. I said, no, that poor old man taken for a ride by everybody he knew. Shiftless nephew. Yeah, don't get me started on that useless employee, Bob Cratchit. and and his little welfare kid, his welfare anchor Bob and baby Tiny Tim. Oh, I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, sometimes it does pay chewing through the straps in the morning.
All right. What should we move on to? Anything else going on for you?
Uh, well, anything else going on? That's a good question. Yeah, yeah. Um, a lot of things. Tomorrow, unfortunately, I was not able to find it, so I'm not wearing it. I don't know where it's gone, but tomorrow is the 10th of November, which in the British Commonwealth is Remembrance Sunday. Now, it's Remembrance Sunday for a very important reason, and that is that the following day, November 11th, is Remembrance Day, which we call Veterans Day, formerly Armistice Day, but it's the day commemorating initially the end of the First World War. This is the 110th anniversary, of course, of the beginning of the war in 1914. The end of the war in 1918 was at November on the Western Front was November 11th, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and this is a uh, very important, very somber thing. The November 11th itself is the feast of Saint Martinus, and of course, Saint Martin was a soldier who changed his lifestyle, became a monk, and then a bishop. And here, he's very popular in. He's extremely popular in Austria and continental Europe, partly because he's a patron of winemakers and that, but also because the geese. One of the stories is that when he was going to be made a bishop, he didn't want to be, and he fled, and he was found out by a bunch of geese who gave his location away. So Martinigans, the goose of St. Martin, is a very popular dish in this part of the world. I'll be having some tomorrow. I love goose, and you don't get it often in the States, so it's I really am very fond of it. Anyway, so St. Martin gave half of his cloak as to a beggar when he was a soldier, and he had a vision or a dream in which it turned out the beggar was actually Christ, and he asked him to lead the rest of his life for him, and he did. St. Martin was also St. Patrick's uncle, and that's kind of an important thing to bear in mind because it reminds us that St. Patrick was a Roman, a patrician. At any rate, because of the military aspect of St. Martin's character, it almost makes sense that Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, Armistice Day the be on this day, and it's a day that we really should take apart to think of those who died in the Great War and all the wars since. It's interesting that in the English-speaking world, in the United States and the British Commonwealth, the symbol of remembrance is the red poppy. In France, it's the blue cornflower, as they call it, the Bleuet de France. In Germany, it's the Vergessmeinnicht, the Forget Me Not. And in Austria, it's the Edelweiss. And every now and then you'll see a display with all three or four of those flowers all bound up together, which reminds us what a horrible waste of life that was. The European Civil War that destroyed so much that was good. There were a couple of poems that came out of that war, which they usually read at Remembrance Day services, and luckily for you, I'll read them now.
Okay.
Well, it's the most famous, and this is why we
You're gonna say Kipling.
use the red. No, it's by John McCrae, who's a Canadian. It's in Flanders Fields. Is by John McCrae, a Canadian soldier, and this poem in particular popularized the use of the poppy in the English-speaking world. Here it is. In Flanders fields the poppies grow. Oh, sorry. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. And the other is the famed Ode of Remembrance for the Fallen, a poem by Lawrence Binyon. And it goes, they shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them, lest we forget. That's the Ode of Remembrance. It's good to remember these things, especially now when we're jumping up and down about the most recent events, because our fathers and our grandfathers and our great grandfathers went away to fight wars, which in the 20th and 21st centuries were always in the name of freedom. And in their thousands and in their millions, they died across the globe, all countries, all nationalities. I'm very grateful that my father and my grandfather came back from their respective wars, because of course if they hadn't, I wouldn't be here, and neither would any of you. Well, I mean, not if mine hadn't, if yours hadn't, I mean. If the events of the last week have given you all sorts of elation, that's nice. I'm glad you're glad. If they've brought you down and made you suicidal, I'm sorry about that. But bear in mind that these things pass by quickly. What remains are the sacrifices the dead have made that we might live and have better lives than they did. And it's incumbent on us to try to do the same for those who are going to follow us. The older I get, the more I see the necessity of not just keeping faith with the past, important though that is, and it's extremely important, but it's also bearing that flame into the future. And that's something that the people of my generation very often forgot. They weren't grateful for the past, nor did they care about the future. It was all about me, here, now, how I'm feeling, how I'm doing. Well, you know what? I'm going to be dead very shortly. I don't mean I'm dying. I've got some disease. I'm dying in a week. If I live another 30 years, that's very shortly. Because I remember my 30th birthday like it was yesterday, and that was 34 years ago. 34 years from now, I'll be 98 if in the unbelievable possibility that I live that long. So the point I'm making is that we're here for such a brief time. And that really means there are only two things we're here for. One is to secure our eternal salvation. And of course, if we don't believe in that, if we don't believe in heaven and hell, then really we don't have much of a life, to be honest. Just, again, we're stuck with ourselves and the little thing that we're doing in our little experience. But at any rate, that's the one. And then the other is to give whatever gifts we've gotten to those who are going to follow us, to make their lives a bit better, the way ours were made better. And I, I can't adequately express, I think, how much I loathe the ingratitude that so many of us have for what we were given and for what came before us. And yeah, I know people have had terrible lives. There's been child abuse. There's this, there's that. I know all that. But life itself is a wonderful gift. If you've got reasonably good health, if you're not dying of some horrible disease, you're not starving, you're not being constantly tortured, then you've got a lot to be grateful for. Believe me, I've been in places like Ukraine where I've been able to see the alternative, and trust me, it's not pretty. So yeah, you know, my dad may have lost his money when I was a kid, and we were forced to grow in poverty. Poor me. Now at this age, I'm grateful for it all because it made me who I am, made me what I am, and I'm grateful for that. But the other half that we also forget, as I say, is the future. Is you people, you guys. I mean, it's why we do the show, of course, but beyond that, and more importantly, everyone my age, according to their own station in life, according to their own position, the young people they know, the children they have, or the nephews, nieces, godchildren, friends, kids, whatever, or at some remove, you know, if you're an artist or an actor or a writer or whatever, your younger audience, we all have an obligation to them. Those two obligations are what so many of my generation perhaps never gave a thought about, never cared about. But that is a recipe for unhappiness. It's not simply a question of selfishness. It's also a question ultimately of being unhappy. Because see, we're made, ladies and gentlemen. I was, my dad was, my grandfather was, you are, your children will be, their children will be. We all of us were made to live with this twofold obligation. And none of us will ever be perfect at it. It's, in a certain sense, I guess it's beyond us. But the harder we try, the happier we'll be in this life. And I do believe that it contributes mightily to where we'll be in the next. Anyway, that's my 64th birthday ode or something.
Something. I'm surprised you didn't say you didn't recite my favorite, which is recessional. I thought you liked that one.
I love that one, but since you said it, yes.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? We'll do two by Kipling.
There we go. Thank you.
We'll do recessional.
And if? Well, what's the other one?
No, you know, I love if, but no, you know, Kipling said it got his son. His son had bad eyesight, and he had very bad eyesight. But Kipling pulled strings and got him sent to the front anyway, and he was killed. And Kipling and his wife every summer would search. They didn't know where his body was. And so until the day he died, until the year he died, Kipling and his wife would go every year to France to try to find their son's body. And they never did. He was found a few years ago, oddly enough. They found young Jack Kipling. But George V, was a great friend of Kipling's. And he had a son, Prince George, who was an epileptic and had a lot of physical problems and died young. Well, it so happened that the young Prince George and Kipling's son Jack died around the same time. There was a movie made about Kipling's son, who's played by the kid that did Harry Potter. He played Kipling's son. There's a very moving scene where you see Kipling and the king together after both their sons have just died recently. Very, very touching. And Kipling wrote a poem called My Son Jack, which is what we hear after recessional. But the recessional was written on the occasion of Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee, when the British Empire was at its height. God of our fathers, known of old, Lord of our far-flung battle line, beneath whose awful hand we hold dominion over palm and pine. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. The tumult and the shouting dies, the captains and the kings depart. Still stands thine ancient sacrifice, an humble and a contrite heart. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. Far called our navies melt away, on dune and headland sinks the fire. Lo, all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. Judge of the nations, spare us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. If, drunk with sight of power, we loose wild tongues that have not thee in awe, such boastings as the Gentiles use, or lesser breeds without the law. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. For heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shod, all valiant dust that builds on dust, and guarding calls not thee to guard. For frantic boast and foolish word, thy mercy on thy people, Lord. It fit the British in 1897, and I think it fits us subjects of the American Empire today. But the other, my son Jack, my boy Jack, sorry. 1915. It was actually written for Jack Cornwell, the 16-year-old youngest recipient of the Victoria Cross, who stayed by his post on board the light cruiser HMS Chester at the Battle of Jutland until he died. Kipling's son John was never referred to as Jack, but this is as close as he ever came to writing about his son's death. Again, bear in mind that Jack Cornwell died at the naval battle of Jutland. Have you news of my boy Jack? Not this tide. When do you think that he'll come back? Not with this wind blowing and this tide. Has anyone else had word of him? Not this tide. For what is sunk will hardly swim, not with this wind blowing and this tide. Oh dear, what comfort can I find? None this tide, nor any tide, except he did not shame his kind, not even with that wind blowing and that tide. Then hold up your head all the more, this tide and every tide, because he was the son you bore, and gave to that wind blowing and that tide. It we are in an odd time, ladies and gentlemen, the month of November, the month of the Holy Souls, when, as we know from all of our New Age friends, what do we know?
Tina Delgado is alive?
Alive.
I don't know. What do we know? I don't know.
Tina Delgado is alive, alive. Well, yes, we do know that. All right,
Okay.
that's a given. That's a given, ladies and gentlemen. Tina Delgado is definitely alive, and I don't think there's any way past that. But you got me there very well. You definitely get a point. That,
Okay.
yeah. No, I was going to say the veil between the worlds is very thin this time of year,
Oh, that too.
but Tina Delgado is alive. She ripped through the veil. Tina Delgado grabbed that thing and ripped it to shreds. You know, I think everyone has a right to dinner with Tina Delgado if they can find her.
Absolutely.
You know, I wish we could play that for them.
Oh,
For
that
those who
yeah.
don't know, lest you think that we're simply free associating. Not that we don't, but still. When I was a kid in LA, we had we talk about going from the sublime to the ridiculous. But we had a rock DJ on the radio starting out station KHJ called the Real Don Steele, and every now and then, apropos of nothing, he would suddenly shout, "What do we know and believe?" And then he would let loose this recording of this woman shrieking frantically, "Tina Delgado is alive, alive!" with no explanation. And after he died, even his wife said she had no idea who Tina Delgado was. Just he never said. There was a legend, which may or may not be true, in the mid '60s when KHJ became a real big deal. At the same time, they brought out the portable transistor radio that you could hold in your hand. And supposedly, Tina Delgado was a KHJ fan, was walking along the railroad track one day. Transistor radio peeled to her head, listening to the station when, boom, a train, she took her farewell journey to the promised land. Now, that may just be an urban legend, but this is what I've heard. But you could almost see, as the ultimate KHJ fan, why she would live on in, in his memory.
Yeah.
Now, of course, if that's not true, then it really has nothing to do with anything, which puts it squarely into the province of off the menu.
Indeed.
All right. All
Oh,
right. Enough of this roll to fall.
all right. Obviously we just had a huge election. Um,
Oh,
any
that.
takeaway? Yeah, all that. Yeah. Charles was making a joke on the pre-show, talking about some trivial things like, "Oh, what happened Tuesday?" And um, oh yeah, this
Oh, wait.
woman from Teaneck, New
Mrs.
Jersey. Yeah,
Yeah, Mrs. Forrest Hargrove.
yeah,
Yeah, on Tuesday, Mrs. Forrest Hargrove of Teaneck, New Jersey, uh, decided, and she's 79, pushing 80, but Mrs. Hargrove decided she's a widow, and her husband and she, I mean, her husband was active in the Kiwanis, Rotary, uh, Lions Club, uh, everything. She herself was being the women's club, the junior league, the gardening club, all that stuff. Together, they were called the first couple, Teaneck's first couple of volunteerism. And so her late husband died, but they always wanted to take a vacation together away from Teaneck. They never did. And so she's decided this year to honor her husband's memory by going on a vacation for the winter. And she's going to the Bahamas. She thought about Puerto Rico, but then thought about the whole language thing. And also the Bahamas are closer. And there's a chance that her daughter might be pregnant. And so she wants to be ready to fly home quickly from the Bahamas in case Mariana, you know, gives birth or something. So she's not quite sure. So at any rate, the citizens of Teaneck are really elated.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Um, you have
Why
this
was there something
strange
else?
you have this strange relationship with a certain type of people in America, and it's the people who are hyper local, because you always talk about getting involved locally and doing all these things, but you
Yeah.
can't help but constantly make fun of these people constantly.
What are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Midwest Joe. That's who I'm talking about.
I wouldn't make fun of Midwest
You,
Joe. He's led a long and productive life. Emphasis on long.
you speak from both sides, out of both sides of your mouth. Like, oh yeah, we need to do all this and this and this. But then when you come to the personality of these people who do this and this locally, you can't help but point out all their pimples and warts of their personality.
Well, yeah, of course. But see, everything in life is a trade-off. You know, you could be horribly sophisticated and cosmopolitan, but then you're not rooted to anything. Or you could be so deeply rooted to a place that you might as well be an oak tree. Well, both of these people, both of these types, have their amusement value.
That's so Coulombe of you. Specifically, I think your mom, perhaps, where it's you can't win. There is no winning.
Well, why would there be?
I know. Yeah, why would there be?
See, your first mistake is going against a Coulombe. My dad used to say that we hunt with the hounds and run with the fox. And he's over there. You're missing him. Shh. They're gaining on you. Can't you hear the horns? You better move.
Wow.
Well, but there's a reason for that. Centuries of seeing every regime we lived under smashed to smithereens. What are we supposed to do? Be happy about that? Really, you might say that with us, it's kind of giving back. Let us not forget that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful phrase of Kipling's about the French Canadians from his Song of the Cities. I don't even have to look this one up. I know it by heart. There's only 4 lines. But man, did he capture our characters so well. Peace is our portion, but a whisper arose, half in jest and half in hate. And we, remembering ancient blows and fearing no man, wait.
Dead on.
So let the little people have their triumph for now, our great masters and lords. Yeah, well, we'll be there when they fall.
All right.
And I don't say that in an unnice way.
Right.
We'll stop and think for a second. Just let this settle in your head. We live in the best of all possible worlds. Family life, the very structure of society that I've just been going on and on about its necessity for maintaining continuity between past, present, and future, etc., and that being essential for personal happiness. It's also essential for society. Now, obviously, we have the best rulers imaginable who do everything they can to foster the family and thereby the common good. And thus, they're deserving of nothing but our complete and total obedience and respect.
Hey, you did some mental gymnastics on that one. You did you did a couple
Yeah, it's called
backflips.
it's called a psychotic break. Why do you ask? If it makes you feel any better, once upon a time, someone yapped at me. Only you Coulombes could weaponize a psychotic break. Well, what good's a psychotic break if you can't use it, right? Is it not so?
I guess
I mean,
so.
insanity should not be wasted.
It's very Joker of you, to be honest. That's what comes to my mind.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, even the smile is on brand for you.
look, I'm just trying to seek a little truth and harmony in a world filled with mendacity and deceit. Now, is that such a crime?
You know, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I don't like you helping, and I don't like all this friendliness, because you're like Edward Scissorhands. It's like, oh, come in here for a hug. Stay away from me, please.
You know, if I could hear that from my president instead of my boss, I would have achieved something. I mean, and I don't really care who the president is. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have the president of the United States, whoever he might be, say to you, could you just like stay away from me? Just, well, yeah, but I've got this problem with the Internal Revenue. Forget it. Just leave me alone, and the IRS will leave you alone. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
That would be.
People ask me, what my funeral plans are. Now, I actually do have them. I intend, I hope, to be interred in my family plot in Fall River, Mass. But my joke is always, well, I'm going to be cremated and have my ashes thrown in the face of whoever's president at the time.
Wow.
My way of giving back. Ding dong. Yes, special delivery for the president. Oh, well, it's got to go through the Secret Service. Oh, I'm sorry. This is sacred. Oh, let him come in. And then you see the top of the urn.
All right. Speaking of the president, let's go back to the election a little bit. So, I'm just going to come out and straight up ask what everyone's wondering. Who'd you vote for? Were you loyal? Were you loyal? Did you keep your promise? Are you a man of your word?
No. No, I'm not. But the problem was he put me in the position. My promise to vote for him over the Roe v. Wade issue was negated by his coming out in favor of abortion. I'm sorry, I couldn't do it. American solidarity got my vote. And but of course it didn't matter who I voted for anyway, because I'm a California voter. So, I mean, I could have voted for Toto and the Tin Man, and it would have meant as much difference. I might have had more of a crisis of conscience of some kind if I had been living in a swing state. But one of the great things about living in a safe state on either side is that you can actually vote your conscience and not worry one way or the other.
Well,
good, because you know your vote is meaningless. if you live in a one-party state like ours.
In the case of Trump, wouldn't isn't it fair to say that actions speak louder than words?
Yes and no. That sounds nice, but what can I tell you? I don't trust him. He doesn't. He doesn't have an ideological center, and he doesn't. I don't trust the man, and I mean, I said I would vote for him if Roe v. Wade were knocked down, which I never thought would happen. It did, and I was prepared to vote for him until he said what he said about reproductive rights and all this kind of stuff. You know, if you want to adopt the language of the enemy, that's fine. You do that, but don't expect me to support him. And the thing that really gets me, I said this on the pre-show, I'll say it again. People said, well, you had to do that to get elected. Well, what if you had to prostitute your mother to get elected? And I'll tell you something else. If you really need to favor infanticide in order to become president of the United States, then maybe it's not something a decent individual should hope for. Are we that low? Are we that disgusting a tribe of morons? Quite possibly. Quite possibly. I mean, in this election, for the first time, pro-life measures actually passed. In Florida, was it Montana, South Dakota, a couple of other places, much to my surprise and joy. So we may not, we may have our 10 just men yet, but I don't know. And mind you, we'll see what happens. I take a very dim view of the man in a lot of ways. I don't think
Could
he's
you
the
say that
second.
again? Did you say dim or
I take
grim?
a very dim view of the man in a lot of ways. But I mean, I certainly don't think he's the second coming of Sauron. He may do some good, but
Yeah, I'm quite
you know,
surprised. You've really changed your tune on Trump. I have an excellent memory, and I can remember when Trump came in, and I remember you said I almost remember the exact quote where the first 100 days of Trump, you were amazed. You said he's trying to do
I
all
was,
of them, keep
I
all of his
was
promises.
extremely
Yeah.
amazed. I was extremely amazed in his first 100 days because he attempted to keep his campaign promises, even ones I didn't like shifting the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. But he had promised he would do that during the campaign, and that was, yeah, I was extremely amazed by that. But that was then. He was saying he was pro-life then. That was a different story. He doesn't say that now. So,
Well, is there
you
anything
know, but
actionable on that score?
on that score, yeah, there's such a thing as executive set-asides. No, this is the great joke. Any president of the United States could have done an executive set-aside on Roe v. Wade, the way they did to maintain Guantanamo. That's the joke. Reagan could have done it. Either Bush could have done it. There would have been, jumping up and down. There would have been all sorts of political implications. But if it meant that much to them, they would have done it. And they didn't.
Well, you didn't hold that against Trump back then so much as you are now. I feel like you've soured.
I have soured, but you know, it's. I always said then that he didn't have a ideological center. I pointed out then that he was in favor of gay marriage. I mean, you can't have grown up reading about his adventures in the pages of Spy magazine and been entirely assured of him. But no, I mean, he is what he is, and in many ways, typical of the United States as they are today. Married several times, uh, and of course his opponent gets her start as the mistress of the mayor of San Francisco. And these are the brightest and the best we can produce, and the answer is yes.
I want you to say
Well,
something
okay.
positive. I want a handful of positive things for Trump from you.
Every day in every way, we're getting better and better.
Is it really all
How's
that
that?
bad? Are you really at that level where you cannot say anything?
No, well, I mean, he seems to his finances, but I'm not. Uh, that first saw the change in his stance on the pro-life thing. I mean, you got to bear in mind, you call me a single issue voter, but to me, the life issues are at the very beginning. I mean, otherwise, you might as well say Hitler was great on transportation. Look at the Autobahns. Uh, Incidentally, we had German advisors help build the Pasadena freeway. So, you know, Hitler did us a favor. From L.A. to Pasadena, that there was we used the autobahns that Hitler built as an example for that. So it's very, you know, it's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. Anyway, uh, the look on your face was great. Anyway, uh, no, I hope for the best. Okay,
Okay, that's good.
but I knew when he slammed the pro-life movement in 2022 that he was going to flip. And when he flipped, I wasn't surprised. So yeah, I soured. Um, and mind you, I think Kamala would have been a horrible disaster. You know, my joke though was that I was elated at Kamala's defeat and disappointed in Trump's victory. But seeing that that's all we have to choose from, you know. Anyway, um, we'll see what happens. I mean, you've got people ready to jump out of windows because he's been elected. You've got other people who think it's the beginning of the beginning of paradise. I doubt it's either one. I I hope for the best. He may surprise me, and if he does, great. I'm happy to be surprised. But the problem we've got is that you have two countries that live in the same country, and they don't see the world in the same sense at all. I don't know how or if you could bring those two things together. I know that a big chunk of the population is going to be yapping about not my president, and that would have been the case, of course, if Kamala had been elected. What I think will probably happen is that our divisions will get worse and worse and worse, and we'll have a strong man. And no, I don't think it'd be Trump. For my friends who think he's the next dictator, I don't think so. I think that person is yet to be seen, not on the stage. But if I were a gambling man, I would bet. And again, I could be wrong, ladies and gentlemen. And if I am, I'm very happy to be wrong. So if in 5 or 10 or 20 years I'm still alive and you can point to me and say, "Ha, you didn't know what you were talking about. You're another Criswell," my answer will be, "Thank God." But what I see is a descent into further division. However greatly, I don't know. But out of it, a strong man who'll tell us all what we're going to do. And at that point, everything is going to depend on his personality and beliefs, whatever they may be. If I were a gambling man, as I began to say, I would bet that he will be a veteran of the forever wars. We it's interesting. The Vietnam veterans never formed a real political bloc But the reason for that, to some degree, is that the country was wealthy enough to, in a sense, buy them off, with veterans benefits and all that. Although God knows it was slow in getting to them. But if our country continues its economic decline, and we can't do that with the forever war people, you're going to have a block of committed, bitter, annoyed folk looking for a leader to take them somewhere. I don't know where.
Okay. You're just in the depths of despair so much right now. Oh, we've got the strong men. We're gonna jump down. We're gonna talk about the strong men. We're gonna talk about the forever
Well,
war. You're just there right now.
well, I'm in the zone. No, I'll now, mind you, if my bleak predictions are correct, however, there's always a sunny side to every silver lining, and that is that the generation coming up today will be in a position to play a much bigger role in things than mine could,
yeah.
because there'll be a lot more flux. There'll be a lot more opportunity for, shall we say, creative change than ever could have been done in the days of, say, Reagan, because the system was strong enough and healthy enough then to continue as it had, more or less, to some degree. But if that ceases to be, then all you kids out there who are thinking deep thoughts about deep stuff, well, you might be in a position to make some of your visions reality. Please God, they'll be good and decent visions and not horrible ones.
Yeah, the younger generations, I think they don't get as much credit as they should in some areas that are overlooked. In terms of all the things that they have to deal with in terms of temptations, a constant bombardment. Previous generations have not had to battle that at all.
Absolutely.
I know if you're a young family in California, and just everywhere too, with inflation. I know, my parents and my in-laws, they're like amazed at sort of the type of decision making that we have to undergo financially and some of these other things, and just sort of navigating. There's so many different traps now, and so I personally see a hardiness that the younger generations are developing in different ways, and that
Sure.
is encouraging to me.
Well, yeah, and also they're not held back by some of the, what's the word I want? Conventions
Yes.
that
Yes.
my generation were. And the internet is, as you know, a two-edged sword, or maybe a seven-edged sword. But you do have access to all kinds of obscure information that was very difficult to get to in my day. Now, there's a downside that there's no context for it. So, and it certainly seems to encourage autism. But again, don't let my doom and gloom feelings about the immediate future. I have a lot of hope for the forthcoming generation. And while that's true to some degree in the state, it's very true in the church. So, I mean, it's why I do what I do, after all. It's why you do what you do. It's why we're here.
Well, that's part of it too, because I was kind of saying this a couple of weeks ago. My politics is kind of a little bit merged with the spiritual aspect, where if 3/4 of the American populace are in an entrenched state of mortal sin, where their intellect has been darkened, are good decisions supposed to come out of that?
Yes.
Like, what are you expecting? You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah,
and so any sort of political shuffling or strategic gamesmanship or whatever, just forget about it. It's neither here nor there. It's just like this is where we're at, and then that's it. And the way you come
And
out of that is get these people out of this entrenched state of mortal sin.
that requires conversion.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that brings us right back to the church, etc. I mean, what's certain is that the country cannot go on as it is now, and the solutions are not purely political. And that, always we're given the thing, vote for the right man and everything will be great. Well, no, because firstly, what defines who the right man is? And again, you could say that candidate A is tons better than candidate B, and that may be true. But that doesn't mean candidate A is a worthwhile individual. It just means he's better than candidate B. And if candidate B is the, Frankenstein's monster, well, so. But anyway, do we have any questions
We
this
have a
week?
bunch of questions, Charles. Absolutely. Wow. Actually, this is a record because we passed the 1 hour mark and we haven't asked a question yet. That's a sign that it's an excellent show, ladies and gentlemen. That's
Yeah,
always how it is.
for us, maybe not for them.
Oh, no. They're hungry for these long episodes. I know these guys are. All right, let's get a question in. Nicholas says, a question about American presidents not related to last week's election. Who do you think... Who do you think the most important former presidents were or are? As in, who among them had the most impact after leaving office? Taft, Obama, and Carter all come to mind, but I do not have the data to come to a solid conclusion.
Well, there are two ways you can look at that. The influence they had as people, and the influence that what they did while in office had, if that makes sense. So, for instance, William Howard Taft was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after he was President of the United States. So that's a no-brainer. Carter was the Democratic Party's cheerleader so long as he was being listened to by anybody.
Carter was important?
Reagan, what's that?
Carter was really important?
Well, for the first decade or two after his presidency, although actually, I have to take that back. But I remember under Bill Clinton, Clinton was trying to get into war with Haiti and then with North Korea. At both times, Carter jumped in as the sort of freelance goodwill ambassador and pulled peace out of the jaws of war, much to Clinton's annoyance.
Yeah.
It was fun to watch, I have to admit. I'm not a big Carter fan, but I have to admit, at the time, I remember saying, well, you can tell what a moron Clinton is when he makes Carter look like a wise older statesman. So you got things like that. Reagan, of course, really didn't count for much after he left office. He was sort of a symbol.
What about Teddy Roosevelt? Because I know he did a lot after.
Well, I
was
coming to Teddy. Teddy actually, his biggest achievement, which I'm sure he wasn't happy with, was ensuring Woodrow Wilson was elected president.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Go ahead, you can say it. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, because he had a falling out with Taft. And so after Taft's first term, he ran for president on the Republican ticket for the primary. Taft defeated him. So he went on to found his own party and split the Republican vote. And that was what allowed Uncle Woody in to mess up America and Europe alike.
That third party dynamic is so annoying. I feel like those third parties, they hold the whole election hostage. And do they not know what they're doing? Like, yeah, well, I'm probably going to decide the election. Like I remember in my lifetime, I felt like Ross Perot did that. to some extent in the 90s with uh, George Bush and Clinton. Did he not?
Yeah, he did. And
And then Nader?
you've had others. Ralph Nader actually ended up killing uh, the
Yeah.
Democratic side. And you had what's his name? Oh gosh, you mentioned Ross Perot, and then there was another fellow who ran against Reagan the first time. I can't remember his name, but um, by and large, Teddy, you can say had a very, very big uh, uh, effect. And then, as far as most presidents, once they've left office, personally haven't done much. The ones who named have, but generally speaking, they haven't done a great deal.
Isn't it almost
Franklin,
kind of their job not to do much? I almost get that impression where you do your
well,
time
yeah,
and then you're done.
and then you're done, and there are exceptions. I mean, Franklin Pierce, who was a Democrat from New Hampshire, was pro-Southern, and so he was held under house arrest during the Civil War, which was kind of interesting. An ex-president being held under house arrest. The And thinking back before then, yeah, most of them when they left the stage, they left the stage. But now, if you want to look at the presidents who left the most lasting impression, whose work in office had continued to have a huge effect, that's somewhat easier, and it's sort of obvious. George Washington, of course, um, Andrew Jackson, Lincoln, of course, and then I would have to say Woodrow Wilson, and then Franklin Roosevelt. And after Roosevelt, in terms of really revolutionizing the country, LBJ, uh, LBJ, and then Obama.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Uh, Nicholas goes on and says, given that this is a monarchist channel, are there any deposed or abdicated monarchs whose lives after their rule were particularly important?
Well, Simeon II of Bulgaria, who's still very much alive, became, since his return as king was vetoed by Bush Sr. in 1992, he actually served a term as prime minister of Bulgaria, which was a weird deal, but he did that. Uh, King Michael of Romania, again vetoed in 1992 to be restored, nevertheless played a big, big part in his country's reconstruction after the Soviets, after Ceausescu. That negation of restoration, by the way, by Mr. Bush Sr. is one of the many things I really dislike about Bush Sr. about his doing. Um, well, Constantine II of Greece, of course, who just died, and Umberto II of Italy. They did a lot of things. Uh, Blessed Karl of Austria-Hungary only lived 4 years, but what a 4 years they were, and they resulted in his becoming a saint. His son Otto uh, had a huge effect in several ways. He convinced Franklin Roosevelt that Austria was a victim country, and that is one of the big reasons why Austria is an independent country today and not part of Germany. Uh, he also played a key role in the fall of the Iron Curtain with the so-called uh, Pan-European picnic. James II, of course, went on to start of England and Scotland and Ireland, started a shadow court in France, and the Jacobite movement came out of him and his successors. Don Carlos of Spain and the colonists, Don Miguel of Portugal. After they were deposed, they kept the fight going.
All right, that's a good list, Charles. That's a good list.
Well, of course, Kigali V of Rwanda.
Oh, of course.
Can't forget him.
That's for sure. All right. Alberta Monarchist has a good question. He says, "Greetings once again, gentlemen, from the Canadian province of Alberta. Since my previous question was such a Debbie Downer, I'm going to ask a question that is decidedly of the light and fluffy kind. Nevertheless, before I ask it, I must set the stage. So, after another day of schmaltzing in Vienna, hobnobbing with the Habsburgs and his fellow dark academic colleagues, Charles returns to his apartment, where he retires to bed, closes his eyes, and suddenly finds himself standing before Christ, seated upon his throne. Our Lord tells Charles that he is going to send him back to the 1950s, where he shall wake up on the morning after the inauguration as Eisenhower's vice president. If that wasn't bad enough, our Lord tells Charles that he will swiftly become Ike's most senior advisor, his closest confidant, and succeed him in turn as the President of the United States and serve 2 full terms, just like Ike did. Charles begs and pleads with our Lord not to send him back, but our Lord has made up his mind, and suddenly Charles wakes up in January 1953. Thus, my question is, what would Charles do knowing that he would wield considerable influence during Eisenhower's administration and then preside as President of the United States for almost the entire decade of 1960s? What would Charles's domestic and foreign policies be? But most importantly of all, how would he strangle the age of Aquarius in its cradle? Wow.
Well, what a commission. What a commission. Well, I suppose that I would start. With in the question of internal affairs. You know, President Eisenhower, they used to call the national pastor because he loved a sort of non-specific religiosity. I wouldn't advise him against that. It would make him happy. I hope keep him busy. Well, several things. Firstly, the appointments to the Supreme Court would be all important. And I forget when Warren was appointed to the court. Mr. Justice Warren, Earl Warren, I think it was. What year was he appointed to the Supreme Court? He would definitely not have appointed Earl Warren to the Supreme Court. I can tell you that. Warren was appointed to October 5th, 1953. So I would definitely tell President Eisenhower, no, not Warren.
How did that happen?
I would have. What do you mean? Well, Warren was governor of California, and he was a real macher in terms of Republican politics, and he wanted to be Chief Justice. So Eisenhower gave him the job, but I wouldn't have.
Okay.
And I would have recommended against various other. When did Douglas get in? Let me see. Justice. It was William O. Douglas. When was he brought in? He came in 1939, so he'd be stuck. But anyway, so he was already there. But I would certainly be against Earl Warren and people like that. So that's one deal. In terms of internal affairs, too, um, the whole question of communism. I mean, I would have certainly have had the State Department and all that carefully investigated, but from the executive branch uh, rather than giving Congress the excuse to go in and do its hearings. I think it's far better the executive departments be cleaned from in-house rather than rouse a sufficient scandal that someone like Senator McCarthy or the House Un-American Activities Committee felt the need to investigate. So that would be one thing. Another thing. Other than that, in terms of discouraging the counterculture, bear in mind also that I'll be president, for 2 terms after he's out, so 60 to 64 to 68, I guess. I'll be president until 1968. Wow. Chief advisor to Eisenhower from 53 to 60, and then president from 60 to 68.
I have a question. I apologize if I missed it. But relating to the Eisenhower doctrine, what would you do
Yeah.
there?
Well, now we're dealing with foreign policy. There's several things. One, I would not have set up our allies for a fall. I would have supported them against their various rebel movements in their different colonies. When it came to Dien Bien Phu, I would have provided the air support for the French, which would have broken the back of the Viet Minh. I would have given Franco the air transport necessary to bring troops to Hungary in '56. I'd have backed the British and the French at Suez. I would not have ordered them to get out of Nigeria or the Belgians to get out of the Congo. You see, like Truman, like Roosevelt, Eisenhower did not believe in having allies so much as he did dependents. But you see, having allies that are strong enough to have their own foreign policies, their own affairs, there's a risk that they won't do what you want them to do. But the plus side is they're not dependent on you, and you don't have to put out the treasure and the blood to keep things going, you see. So I would have encouraged them all precisely so that we didn't have to be the world's policeman. If the French had suppressed Ho Chi Minh in the 50s, we would not have been in there in the 60s. I mean, it makes much more sense to support the British and the French and the Portuguese and the Belgians and the Dutch in holding on to their territories.
We can't trust anyone else.
Well, not easily. I mean, you can't the problem, or you can't trust anyone else but ourselves. Well, that didn't work very well. And I mean, we like to present ourselves as the lords of liberty, which is one reason why we attacked our allies, but and sided with the Soviet Union against them. But it was madness. I mean, another thing I wouldn't have done, of course, it happened in '52 before Eisenhower's reign. But I certainly would not have had the CIA go after the Egypt and Iraq the way they did. That was just crazy. Uh, overthrowing the Arab monarchies just helped make things worse. And I would have, with my position in Israel, I would have forced a more equitable solution in the Holy Land than what they ended up doing. Um, I mean, now the other thing, of course, is that I would have actively supported anti-Soviet groups throughout the Soviet Empire uh, and Russia. That's what I say. I mean, without getting directly involved, if Franco wanted to send troops to support the Hungarian revolutionaries in '56, more power to him. You need transports, you get transports.
Okay.
Because what Eisenhower did was he encouraged the Hungarians to rebel and then did nothing for them when the inevitable reaction came.
Hmm.
And he really did the same thing with the British and the French over Suez. He did the same thing with the French over Dien Bien Phu, and on and on and on. So a good part of my dealing with Mr. Eisenhower in terms of foreign affairs would simply be, why don't we try keeping our word or not advancing it? Rather than playing Lucy with the football for Charlie Brown over and over again. How about we not do that? How about we not be perfidious America? And when Mr. Eisenhower retired and I was elected on the day I was actually born, yeah, that's the funny thing about this fantasy, because I would have been elected president of the United States on the day, in fact, that I was born.
Mm.
So, and the great thing would be a Republican French Canadian defeating a Democratic Irishman.
Oh, that's a fantasy right there. That's just. Whew.
Well, yeah, but New Bedford, Massachusetts would have erupted in joy. There would have been bonfires, free chow mein sandwiches passed out in the streets. Fall River, too. I mean, all over Bristol County, there'd be Taunton. Uh, there'd be all sorts of Dartmouth. There'd be all kinds of celebrating going on. I'm telling you, they would be just jumping up and down with glee. And not just the French, the Portuguese and Italians, too. Providence, the Italians in Providence would have been just beside themselves. So now that I'm president of the United States, I will take a few, I will steal a few of JFK's uh, things in the sense that Eisenhower and Mamie were kind of dowdy people. So, presuming that I had a wife who was capable of it, uh, I would try to steal the whole Kennedy elegance thing. That I would definitely go in for, and patronizing the arts and this and that. But unfortunately for the anti-Catholics of America, in that election of that 1960, they had two Catholic candidates running against each other.
Hmm.
Me versus JFK.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would make my faith a very public thing. No separating it from my public life. So have to celebrate my inauguration, a solemn high at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. Have the priest of my choice, or a cardinal, certainly not Cardinal Cushing, do the invocation of my inauguration. Receive the nuncio first of all the other ambassadors. I do this kind of thing. I make my faith very public. Um, and the I would encourage it the way a president can encourage anything he wants to without making it the law, if you see what I mean, without an executive order. But going to mass would definitely be a big part of what I did in public. And I might even do something really wild, like marching in a Corpus Christi procession. To say
Wow.
nothing of having a chapel at the White House and daily mass.
Hmm.
In other words, I would follow Bellick's suggestion I would try to make the faith during my time as fashionable as my presidency itself.
Nice.
Now, what effect this would have had on Vatican II, I don't know. Uh, it's hard to tell, but I would have I would make my dislike of the changes in the liturgy known. And if the President of the United States, the first Catholic president, didn't really appreciate them, that might have had some effect. Because remember, churchmen are always much more interested in the views of powerful politicians than they are of normal Catholics who pay money and, end up having to foot the bill for everything.
Definitely.
Wow. I mean, could you imagine if the President of the United States had said in 1964 that he didn't really appreciate the movement away from Latin?
That would be wild.
Wouldn't that have been something? Uh, I have informed His Holiness strictly as a private individual and not as President of the United States that I am not at all on board with these changes.
Hmm.
But then I woke up, and there I was in my bed in my apartment in Trumau, and I wiped my head, and I thought, woof, I don't have to deal with this. And then I thought, and you know what? I'm not Kamala Harris or Donald Trump either. For the bedpost was my own. The bed was my own. And best of all, the time was my own to make amends in. What's that from?
I don't know.
A Christmas Carol.
Ah, all right.
The Alberta Monarchists just gave us our version, my version, of A Christmas Carol.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I woke up. The spirits have done it all in 4 terms. But no, I to be honest too, I really would not want to be president of the United States. Even with the best of intentions, it's a hard-blooded job.
Yeah.
But remember this: Inauguration Day is January 20th. The White House, Camp David, Air Force One, the network of presidential libraries and homes around this great nation of ours. The president's own, the Marine Band that serenade him, the old guard at the White House, the Secret Service, the Red Mass at Washington St. Matthew's Cathedral, the reception for diplomats, concerts in the East Room, the lighting of the Christmas tree, of the National Christmas tree, the Easter egg roll, the annual pardoning of the 2 turkeys at Thanksgiving.
Okay, well, this is like this is reminiscent of your time as mayor of New York. Now we're getting into the schmaltz territory.
Oh, well, listen, the presidency of the United States needs schmaltz. And let me tell you, both of my inaugurations would be in morning coat and striped trousers.
Yeah, I can picture that.
Completely formal. My as would be my State of the Union address, and I would expect Congress to dress accordingly. I throw over the first pitch at the Washington Redskins. I would do everything, all that stuff, and yes, it would ooze schmaltz. And you know what? I'd bring back the January 1st levy that Hoover got rid of because he shook 6,000 people's hands in one day. I gotta say that would be a little much,
Wow.
but I would bring that back, the New Year's Day levy, and it would be televised. It would be as much a part of New Year's Day as the Rose Parade, which I might be Grand Marshal of one day as president one year.
Sorry, I'm stuck on the 6,000 handshaking. How could that be? You're just
Yeah,
like this for like the
yeah.
entire
And
day.
his head was swollen. It was horrible. Oh, and you know what else I would do? You know what else I would do?
What?
I would steal a leaf from Teddy Roosevelt, and I would grand marshal parades around the country. St. Patrick's Day and Thanksgiving in New York, the Rose Parade, the Mummers Parade in Philadelphia. Of course, it'd be hard to do the levee and the Mummers Parade. I'd have to use a helicopter. But, this to help build a national sense of pride. And America's in it together. We're pulling together.
Mm.
And without Justice Warren and his court destroying what little we have in common, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Happy days would be here again, and I would reach out to members of all parties and none and say that our country, built upon principles that our fathers were willing to die for, stands today as a beacon of freedom in a world encompassed by darkness and pain. My fellow Americans, I want you to know that your government, your president, shall do all in their power to ensure that Americans everywhere, from Guam to the Virgin Islands, insofar as is humanly possible, will sleep well tonight. Because I can guarantee to you, ladies and gentlemen, that your president, the First Family, your Congress, your Supreme Court, your executive departments, all of them will sleep well tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the entire Internal Revenue will sleep well tonight and look forward to their work of auditing in the morning.
Excellent.
You don't sound impressed by that.
I'm very impressed.
No.
There we go.
But don't you think that the presidency of the United States should have schmaltz?
I think so. I think there might be a return there. I don't know why we ditched it.
Well, because we were stupid. I mean, JFK's was the last formal inauguration. Reagan reformalized his first one a little bit. He didn't wear a morning coat per se, but he wore a strolling coat, which has the same relationship to the cutaway that a dinner jacket, a tuxedo, does to a tailcoat. So he was a bit more formal, but we need top hats. We need morning coats and striped trousers. We need impressiveness.
I mean, I don't see how that doesn't. I don't see why that wouldn't be effective and give you a leg up on everybody.
Well, it would. It would. The problem is that the people in charge are boomers.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. I guess as your generation passes away, I feel like that's going to be revisited.
Well, you'll need to. I mean, just as, all kidding aside for a moment, when Reagan went out of office, he called for a restoration of civic ritual. Well, obviously, our problems require a lot more than just a restoration of civic ritual, but it's not like that wouldn't help. He wasn't entirely wrong.
Right.
And your generation, as you become mayors and governors and presidents, one thing, again, not a major thing, it's not what's going to solve everything, but it will certainly make things a little easier, both for the incumbents of offices and for their constituencies, is to bring this stuff back. when you attend the inauguration of a governor or the first speech of a mayor in a city, there should be a certain amount of formality, of gravitas. That the business of governance is not simply crooks lining their own nests. That, well, I mean, again, you go back to the three kinds of government, of good government, and the three kinds of evil government. If you're governing for the common good, then you're one of the three good kinds. If you're governing for your own sweet self, then you're one of the three evil kinds. Uh, and as we've already implied, getting any of the three of the good, getting people interested in the common good, requires a lot more than just voting for the right party. But having said all of that, it was a sign getting rid of that stuff. Remember what I said earlier that my generation broke faith with the past and with the future?
Yeah.
Well, let's just take the morning coat for the presidency, the governorship, or the mayoralty. It symbolized precisely that continuity. It symbolized when you pass from one administration, national, state, local, to the next, governance goes on, and it is, in a certain sense, a sacred thing. I like to joke about, the Capitol building being a bordello and something you can't really desecrate, and that's true objectively, but subjectively, um, the governance of these United States and of each of the several states therein, and of the counties and cities appertaining thereto, is not a small thing. It's a weighty obligation. I think part of the problem is, see, when you look at either Trump or Harris or anybody else, they don't give the feeling that that's where they're at. Whereas you should look at governance as a burden that you take on for the sake of the common good, and you do it in a sense with a heavy heart. Our best presidents have been like that, and there haven't been many of them. One of the big problems with the presidency as it is that he's supposed to be at once the leader of the nation and the leader of a party. Well, inherently there's a problem. For many years, it was a problem that was able to be overcome through the president acting as sort of the high priest of the national cult. But we lost that. We lost all those things. So now we have what we have. But all I can tell you is if you end up as mayor of Arcadia, I'm telling you, striped trousers, lots of schmaltz, appearing, the mayor's annual concert, the the carols sing, appear at everything. The Arcadia City Hall Christmas lighting, invite the public, friends of the library, and yes, I make fun of Midwestern Joe and all the rest of it. But honestly, without those people, we wouldn't have a country. We wouldn't have anything. We would have we I mean, listen, if the country was inhabited solely by sophisticated cosmopolitans, we'd collapse. So I do make fun of Midwestern Joe, and I do make fun of Mrs. Hargrove and her long-suffering husband. But God bless them. Where would we be without them? And just for those who are asking, I do think Mrs. Hargrove has earned her vacation in the Bahamas.
All right.
Nassau's gain is Teaneck's loss.
Indeed. Okay, we are out of time, Charles. Do you have any final words?
I do. I do. After 64 years of life in some of the most bizarre times in history, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to God for my family, for my friends, for the places I've been, things I've seen. I'm grateful for the strange sort of profession he landed me in. I really couldn't describe it easily, but whatever it is, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful to be doing the show. I'm grateful for our audience. I'm grateful for everything, even the difficult and unpleasant parts of my life. As I said earlier, they're part of the whole. And without them, I wouldn't be here just as much as the good ones. So I thank God for all the blessings He's given me, which I certainly have not deserved in any way. And I hope for all of you out there, my young friends, I hope that when you are my age, you can look back over your life and be as happy with it as I've been with mine. Uh, there's a lot of evil in the world. There's a lot of terrible stuff. There's a lot of good. And each of us has the choice to make which of those two qualities we'll see as predominant. And also, of course, I have to thank, after last night's blowout here, Mike Foster, Jesse Oriano, uh, Uri and Basil Tarek, Marco Colasa, Maggie Colasa, Hannes DeMeo, Dan Devine. Oh man, the list goes on and on and on and on. I want to thank all of you, everyone, everywhere, for everything. And that sounds a bit. You say I was down in the dumps before. Well, I am so grateful for everything. I can't tell you. Even, believe it or not, for my job at Tumbler House Towers. Even for my little cubicle with the cobwebs up in the corner that little old Rose says she can't reach because she can't stretch up straight anymore, but that she would have done 20 years ago. She remembers that she didn't have any trouble doing it back then, but now it's hard, and there's no money to get her an assistant, which would be helpful because she can't reach into the corners. But nevertheless, she's still going to try to do her best because she wants to keep her job and she doesn't want to get fired and end up living on dog food. At least that's the way she put it to me. Uh, I'm grateful for all of it. And I'm even grateful for my last run up to the 13th floor.
Really? What happened?
Well, it was the most astonishing thing. The door opened, and then I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
The most astonishing thing you when you went to the 13th floor?
Ah, yes, exactly. It was wonderful. I mean, the doors opened, and then I'm sorry, what were we talking about again?
We were just wrapping up, Charles, and you were thanking everybody.
Oh,
You're grateful. You're grateful for your job.
I am. I am. I really am. And I wouldn't have it, ladies and gentlemen, if it weren't for you. Uh, you know, thank you for reading my books and my articles. Thank you for watching the podcast. Thank you for Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, the outlet formerly known as Twitter. Thank you, everybody, for everything. Uh, life can be a dream. Shaboom, shaboom. I do have a question for you, though.
What is it?
Well, what is it if it's Monday?
It's off the menu.
And what about the soul you save?
It just may be your own.
See you next week, gang. God bless you all.